All right, today we're diving into a short story that is just so sharp, so witty, and honestly, wonderfully grotesque. It uses satire like a surgeon's scalpel. It's called The Proper Exchange, and we're going to break down exactly how it so perfectly takes down social hypocrisy.
In this line right here, wow, it's like the entire story is boiled down into this one perfect sentence. It totally captures the central theme, that huge, gaping canyon between a polished, wealthy exterior and a rotten, totally indifferent soul. Keep this idea in your head, because it's the lens for everything that comes next.
So let's get right into it. First up, we've got to meet our main characters. The story introduces us to this aristocratic couple who are the living embodiment of that quote. I mean, they are a walking, talking masterclass in what the story calls grotesque indifference. And the author is so clever here. It's all about contrast, right? On the outside, you've got the whole package. Impeccably dressed, tailored wool, fine silks, the works. But then you actually look at their faces. And whoa, they're described as repulsive, asymmetrical, sneering, almost decayed. Now, this isn't just for shock value. The author is practically screaming at us their physical ugliness is a direct reflection of their inner moral corruption.
So what kicks this whole thing off? It's something so small, so everyday, you could almost miss it. Their little tiny poodle does its business on the sidewalk. And what do? Absolutely nothing. They just keep walking, noses in the air without even breaking their stride. And that one little moment of supreme indifference, that's the spark that lights the whole fuse.
Okay, so the stage is set, but they weren't alone. A second character enters the scene, an observer, who sees this whole little display of entitlement go down. And their reaction brings up a super modern problem, one I think we can all relate to. How do you respond to injustice when you know everyone is watching? And this line just nails the observer's dilemma. He's furious, and he has every right to be. But think about it. We live in a world of CCTV and smartphones everywhere. If he just loses it, he's the one who ends up looking like the villain on social media that night. It's a perfect summary. Justice isn't just about what's right anymore, it's about how it looks. So he's got this choice to make, right? Two paths he can take. Path number one is what the story calls rational fury. And you know what that is? It's that immediate gut reaction. Just pick up the mess and fling it at them. It would feel great for sure, but it's crude, it makes him the bad guy. But then there's path number two, the surgical approach. This is the smart play, the calculated, creative response that delivers justice without turning him into the monster. And yeah, he realizes brute force is not the way to go here. The situation demands something with a little more finesse. So he opts for a mission of creative rebellion. Now we get to see exactly how this proper exchange goes down. The execution is just chef's kiss. It's perfect. First, he picks up the evidence with this mischievous little smile, reframing it as him reclaiming a lost part of their identity, which is just hilarious. Then comes the misdirection. It's like a magic trick. He's all polite chit-chat about the weather. His calm left hand pets their yapping dog to disarm them, while his busy right hand, the other hand is doing a perfect reverse pickpocket. And this brings us to the punchline of the whole story. It is just so beautiful and so biting. These two people, who have lived their entire lives totally detached from the consequences of their actions, are now, for the first time in years, unknowingly carrying the one truly honest thing they've produced all day.
I mean, what a great story, right? But the real question is, why does it hit so hard? What makes it such an effective piece of social critique? Well, let's peel back the layers a bit and get under the hood of this thing.
Okay, first we have to talk about the narrator. The narrator is basically the story's secret weapon. The voice is so calm, so refined. Think of a classic BBC Nature documentary. And that is what makes it so funny. You've got this very sophisticated, clinical voice calmly describing a very crude, very visceral situation. It's that huge contrast that makes the satire bite so hard. The narrator provides the intellectual cover for the dirty work. And of course, the engine driving this whole thing is black humor. It isn't just there for a cheap laugh. It is doing some serious heavy lifting. The comedy all comes from that ridiculous clash between the couple's snobby elegance and the grotesque reality of what's happening. And here's the key. That humor is what turns a simple, disgusting act into a creative mission for justice.
It makes the ending feel not just funny, but deeply, cathartically earned.
So, let's bring all these pieces together. You've got the clever narrator, the dark humor, the perfect little plots, and what do you get when you mix them all up? You get a flawless execution of a classic literary device. And that device is poetic justice. Now, we've all heard the term, but what does it really mean? It's not just about the bad guys getting what they deserve. It's when their punishment is, well, it's tailor-made. It fits their crime in this perfectly ironic way that is just so much more satisfying.
And the proper exchange is maybe one of the best examples you'll ever find. Think about it. What was the couple's crime? Ignoring their own filth, their own responsibility. So what's their punishment? To be forced to physically carry that exact filth with them. They are literally made to hold the physical version of the moral ugliness they pretend doesn't exist. It's perfect.
And so that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The story makes a pretty strong case for a quiet, clever, surgical response over a loud, angry one. And it really makes you wonder, in our own lives, when we're faced with that kind of arrogance, what kind of justice is truly the most effective? Something to think about. Thanks so much for diving into this one with me.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically going to dissect a story. We're going to look at all the source material, its DNA, if you will, from that first raw pitch all the way to the final visual blueprint. How does an idea become, well, a story? All right, let's just dive right in with this line from the writer's notes. It perfectly sets the tone. This really gets at the heart of the vicious little tale we're about to unpack, this idea of a beautiful outside hiding something, well, pretty rotten underneath. Okay, so first up, let's look at where it all started. This is the foundational source, the original story pitch. Think of it like the seed of the idea, The core story before any of the fancy artistic stuff gets layered on top. So, right from the get-go, the very first line of the pitch hits us with this huge contradiction. These characters, they're not just rich, they're elegant, yet grotesque. And that word, pompously, that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? This whole story is about entitlement. And boom, here it is. The inciting incident. It's such a small thing, right? But it speaks volumes. It shows this incredible arrogance. They are so far above it all, they just pretend not to see the mess they've left behind. That's the key here, that casual dismissal. That's the crime. So now our guy enters the scene, and his reaction? It's just pure unfiltered fury. His first instinct is, hey, you dropped this. It's a totally human impulse, even if it is a little crude. But, and this is where it gets interesting, here comes the modern twist. The pitch brings in a CCTV camera, and that changes everything. Suddenly, there's this huge constraint. In a city that's always watching, if he does the obvious thing, no matter how right he is, he's the one who's going to look like the villain on the news. And this is the pivot point of the whole story. He completely shifts gears, right? He goes from just raw anger to something much more surgical, more creative. And the pitch specifically mentions his mischievous smile. This isn't just about getting even anymore. Oh no. This is now a creative mission. Okay, so that's the basic story. But let's be real, why does it feel so satisfying? To figure that out, we got to dive into our next set of sources, the analytical notes. This is where we see how this simple little story works as a really sharp piece of satire. And right at the heart of it all is this idea of poetic justice. I mean, the whole story is basically a machine built to deliver the perfect punishment, a punishment that fits the crime. They ignored their own mess? Well, guess what? Now they're going to have to carry it with them. The real power of the satire here comes from this collision. It's just shocking. You've got this super fancy world of high fashion and snooty attitudes on one hand, and on the other, the raw, real, earthy, and all the humor, all the commentary, it lives right in that gap between the two. Now, another huge piece of the puzzle is the narrator. The choice to have this really sophisticated, kind of detached voice, that's not just for show. It's a tool, a really important one that creates this perfect ironic distance from what's actually happening. See, the narrator isn't just, telling us what happened. They're more like a scientist, making a clinical observation. You've got this beautiful classical English describing something not so beautiful. It's a perfect clash. They're basically analyzing the couple's whole deal. And maybe most importantly, they're explaining why justice has to look different in a world where you're always on camera. And this line from the source material just nails that last point. In a city of 1,000 eyes, justice is a matter of optics. Wow, that changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly, what our hero does isn't just petty revenge, it's a smart, calculated response to the world he's in. Justice has to be clever, it has to be sneaky. All right, let's get to the final stage. We've got the story, we've got the analysis, but how do you show it? How do you turn these ideas into images? For that, we turn to our last set of sources, the visual prompts from the art director. This is literally the blueprint for how to create the grotesque. And the main goal for the visuals is super simple. Make their outsides match their insides. Their inner ugliness has to show up on their faces. It's not enough for them to act awful. They have to look awful, like their souls are literally rotting from the inside out. And get this, to pull that off, the art prompt is so specific. It doesn't just say, hey, make them look bad. No, it specifically calls out the painter Francis Bacon. You know, the guy famous for those raw, twisted, distorted portraits? It's genius. It's the perfect visual shorthand for this person is morally corrupt. Okay, so for the big moment, the climax of the story, the visual instructions are crystal clear. The whole point is to focus on how precise this act is. This isn't some sloppy, angry revenge. No, this is clean. It's a surgical operation. And just look at the detail in this prompt. It is incredible. It's all about textures and what you can feel, wool, leather, and that hidden item. It's so visceral. This is how you translate the tension of the story into a moment the audience can almost feel. Okay, one last source to look at. This one breaks down our hero's thought process, step by step. We get to see exactly how he lands on this unique form of revenge. And what this shows us is this really satisfying little character arc, right? He goes from just raw emotional fury to thinking it through, holding back, and then finally turning it into this creative mission. He totally flips the script. He goes from being a victim of what they did to being the absolute master of the situation. And this is the final nail in the coffin. The narrator's last line just seals the deal with this devastating piece of irony. It completely reframes the whole grotesque act as, well, a moment of honesty. Maybe the first one they've had in years. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's seeing how all these different sources we looked at, the pitch, the analysis, the visual notes, they're not just separate documents. They're layers. Each one adds a little more meaning, a little more irony, and they all work together to build one simple but really powerful story. And that really just leaves us with one final question, doesn't it? It kind of turns the whole thing back on us. In a world that's always watching, what does justice even look like? Does it have to be a performance? Does it have to be just as clever, just as sneaky as the world it's trying to fix?
Olá! Hoje vamos mergulhar numa pequena história que é uma autêntica lição sobre hipocrisia, com uma pitada de nojo e uma forma de justiça. Bem, digamos que é tão precisa quanto gratificante. Vamos lá desmontar a troca apropriada. Usavam a seda mais fina para cobrir as almas mais grosseiras. Reparem bem nesta frase. É o ponto de partida perfeito, não é? Define logo o tom, a crítica, a ideia central que vamos explorar, o enorme fosso que existe entre aquilo que parecemos ser e aquilo que realmente somos.
Muito bem. A nossa história, um ato incivil, começa com um incidente que até podia parecer banal, mas que, na verdade, vai dar origem a uma reação completamente fora do comum.
Vamos pintar o cenário. Temos um casal aristocrático, daqueles que parecem saídos de uma revista, mas se olharmos com atenção, os rostos deles são grotescos. Já nos dão uma pista da fealdade que vai lá dentro. E o primeiro ato deles é de um desprezo total pelo espaço de todos. É um gesto pequeno, mas que, na verdade, diz tudo sobre eles.
E esta observação do narrador é absolutamente cirúrgica. Não é um mero esquecimento, entendem? É uma cegueira escolhida, um privilégio que os faz sentir que estão acima das pequenas regras e responsabilidades que o resto de nós partilha.
É então que entra em cena o nosso protagonista. Alguém que vê esta pequena injustiça e sente aquela raiva imediata que todos nós já sentimos. Aquele impulso de querer fazer justiça pelas próprias mãos, ali mesmo.
Só que há aqui uma complicação muito moderna. Nós vivemos debaixo do olhar constante das câmaras de vigilância, os 1000 olhos da cidade.
Qualquer ato de justiça mais direto, mais cru, transformaria o nosso herói no vilão da história. A razão, portanto, obriga-o a ter calma.
E é aqui, neste preciso momento, que a história se torna genial. A raiva não se evapora, não. Ela é refinada. Transforma-se de um impulso violento numa missão criativa, quase uma performance artística. E aquele sorriso juvenil que lhe aparece no rosto diz tudo. A vingança vai ser uma obra de arte.
Esta forma de ver a ação é fundamental. Ele não está a limpar porcaria. Ele está a executar um ato de restauração irónica. Está a reclamar uma parte da identidade daquele casal e a devolver-lhes algo que, no fundo, lhes pertence. O clímax é tenso, mas silencioso. Com a destreza de um mágico, ele usa a amabilidade como um disfarce perfeito. A mão esquerda distrai o cão com uma festa, enquanto a direita cumpre a sua missão secreta. Uma peça para cada bolso.
E assim, a história fecha o seu ciclo. O casal continua o seu passeio, todo pomposo, só que agora transportam fisicamente a sujidade que antes representavam apenas de forma metafórica. A justiça foi feita, sem uma única palavra.
Muito bem, a história está contada. Mas agora vamos à parte talvez ainda mais interessante. Como é que ela é contada? Vamos começar pela peça-chave de tudo isto, a voz do narrador.
O truque está todo neste contraste. De um lado, temos uma voz super elegante, culta, quase académica, a fazer lembrar um documentário da BBC. Do outro, temos a descrição de um ato nojento. É este choque, esta dissonância que cria a sátira. A elegância da linguagem só serve para realçar ainda mais a baixeza do comportamento.
Portanto, o narrador faz muito mais do que contar a história. Ele é o nosso guia. Dá-nos a distância necessária para apreciarmos a ironia, analisa a moralidade do ato e, no fim, claro, sela a justiça com aquela frase final perfeita. É ele que dá um nó na gravata.
Isto leva-nos diretamente ao motor que faz esta narrativa andar para a frente, o seu uso brilhante de humor negro.
É a pergunta de 1 milhão de euros, não é? Como é que uma coisa que nos causa repulsa consegue, ao mesmo tempo, pôr-nos a pensar e até a sorrir com um certo sentimento de satisfação?
A resposta está aqui. O humor negro pega num tabu, neste caso, excrementos, e usa-o como uma arma para expor um problema social muito maior. A arrogância, a hipocrisia e a falta de civismo de certas elites. Basicamente, o humor negro aqui tem 3 funções. Primeiro, destrói a fachada de superioridade do casal. Segundo, transforma um problema chato da cidade numa missão cheia de criatividade. E o mais importante, faz com que o castigo, que é visceral, pareça perfeitamente lógico e justo.
O que nos leva ao grande tema da justiça. E não é uma justiça qualquer, é uma justiça poética, perfeitamente talhada à medida do crime.
Vejam bem a evolução do nosso observador. Ele passa por 3 fases muito claras. Começa com a fúria, depois passa à contenção, forçada pela vigilância, e por fim chega à missão cirúrgica. É uma evolução da emoção pura para a inteligência artística. Ele não reage, ele responde.
E o resultado disto tudo é um exemplo de manual do que é a justiça poética. O castigo não é aleatório, é um espelho do crime. Eles deixaram a sua marca no mundo para todos verem, e agora carregam-na consigo, sem sequer saberem.
Para terminar, falta falar de um aspecto muito importante, a filosofia visual da história, onde a aparência é, literalmente, uma janela para a alma.
O contraste não é só na narração, está no próprio casal. Por fora vestem a riqueza, a seda e a lã, mas os seus corpos, os seus rostos, revelam a verdade interior. A sua fealdade física é o reflexo direto da sua podridão moral. E atenção, que esta escolha estética não é ao acaso. Inspira-se numa longa tradição artística que usa o grotesco para falar da condição humana. Aqueles rostos decadentes são por si só um comentário visual que reforça toda a narrativa. E terminamos com esta frase, o remate final do narrador, que é simplesmente perfeito. Deixa-nos a pensar sobre o que é que realmente nos pertence. No mundo cheio de aparências e falsidades, talvez a única coisa genuinamente honesta que aquele casal produziu foi precisamente aquilo que agora levam nos bolsos.